Yeah.
I saw the last
Yeah, we're running a little bit past when we should start, but it's in the short end. As you notice, this room's sort of hard to find.
Yes, that's right, actually. That's you.
Right? I spent 5 minutes wandering around. Hello, Robert. We're running a little bit on the late side of things. The room is in a hard place to find, so we're going to be starting a little delayed. We'll get started in a minute. It's almost 5 after. Okay, let us get started. Welcome to BFD. I'm Jeff Haas. Rashad is unable to co-chair for this session because he is unable to make it to Singapore. Quick check, can everybody hear me fine through the microphone? Yes, good. Somebody in the back, good. Yes, thank you. Xiaoming has agreed to take notes so that I can pay attention to the session. As you notice, I have a few things to operate here. We have 4 sessions today. Covering this, of course, the thing dies on me. Full screen. Okay, so quick agenda. We're going to go through a chairs update. We're going to go through BFD for VXLAN, BFD for large packets. Both of these have been through working group last call. And we were supposed to have a presentation on one-armed BFD. Is there one of the document authors in the room to present that? Okay, thank you. So document status, BFD for VXLAN had a working group last call. It created a lot of discussion, over 300 messages, which is very unusual for BFD. Hopefully we got over the majority of the discussion. I believe it is Greg that will actually be giving the presentation on the current status of things. Second item is we also tried to call working group last calling BFD for large packets. This actually prompted some discussion that had been stalled out, and we need to get some revisions for that. I'll be covering that without wearing my chair's hat for this purpose. As part of working on BFD unsolicited, a minor change was discovered to be needed to make at the last second in the BFD Yang module. Rashad has asked the RFC editor for procedure for taking care of that, and that should actually be in progress. Once we clear that point, that will clear a Yang doctor comment on the BFD unsolicited draft, and I believe that will be finished with working group last call. We have a little bit of an interesting situation for the BFD authentication documents. It's a series of 3 of them. One of them has IPR on them that has generated some discussion. During IETF 105, we put forth to the group that we believe the documents are at this point in a technically viable and a complete standpoint. No further technical commentary was given on them. We also asked if the working group would be willing to allow these to proceed. It is perfectly allowable for IETF to have documents that have IPR on them. The IPR holder, in this case Sienna, noted that their IPR is no more restrictive than other IETF BFD IPR, including my employer Juniper, which is got IPR and RFC 5880 for BFD itself. I spent a little bit of time in the working group discussion. There was a small amount of show for taking the documents forward. It was not a huge list of the group, so we have some small support. I believe Greg's objections still stand, so that's at least one public request not to. I've been spending a little bit of the IETF trying to discuss with the people about our consensus process with regard to this. The general outcome of that discussion is that the main consideration IETF has for intellectual property restrictions on documents is their implementability. So if the IPR would prevent somebody from actually being able to implement it, that's the main consideration. The sense that has been given from the intellectual property holders is that they would offer licensing for it and that it could be carried forward. They decline to state whether a fee may actually be judged. So implementations such as Linux, which need to be open source and free, may potentially be encumbered. So this remains somewhat of an open discussion. Based on what my process discussions have been, we have weak but positive force to actually take the documents and submit them to RFC. I will be spending the next several days concluding discussions with people in ISG and otherwise to see what the process looks like, and we'll take back to the mailing list what the process looks like for that. BFD v2 and other extending BFD discussions. The IETF 105 discussion was actually very positive. We did have a number of people working on various timing things, especially from the IPPM related group documents. They did not personally find BFD a good fit for encapsulating their stuff. The general feel of the discussion had been to not overload BFD v1, which is gotten significant traction within the industry for providing connectivity verification, and that we don't want to overload it, make it more difficult for it to do its core job. Was there room to leverage BFD PDUs and procedure, which is the motivation we seem to be seeing for putting additional information into BFD for different things, including OAM? There seems to be some level of positive discussion on that. I need to find a way to generate a discussion with enough of the ISG to figure out how we want to target such a thing, if at all, because by expanding the scope of what it carries and who gets to use it, we potentially have this work leave BFD as being the working group. We're effectively giving IETF a gift of a state machine, and past that point, how IETF chooses to use it is part of the charter discussion. Martin, did you care to say anything on this at this point, or? Okay. Okay, so we'll continue this discussion with the ISG offline, and hopefully we'll have some level of traction on this point, for the upcoming IETF 107. So first presentation is Greg, I think. And the clicker, as usual, does not seem to be working.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So as Jeff explained, this captures the updates that were applied from the last meeting to before this meeting, resulting from addressing some of the directorate comments and the discussion that we had primarily with experts in VXLAN. So the discussion were more related to VXLAN environment and what is allowed and how VXLAN is used, rather than just to base BFD machinery. One of the questions in comments that we received in the working group or just past working group last call was the question of why, whether there was sufficient discussion of the working group of making the statement in the document that BFD Echo is outside the scope of this specification. So the chairs made another call to the working group, asking for consideration and comments. And to the best of my recollection, there were no comments. So I believe that based on that, the chairs concluded that working group is agreeing with the statement that BFD Echo is outside the scope. So, which means that if somebody wants to do that, there will be another specification. But this specification does not address any aspects of using BFD Echo mode over VXLAN, though, yes, technically that's possible because it's considered to be a single IP hop. We had a lot of discussion on selection and use of destination MAC in the inner Ethernet header and IP destination address in the inner encapsulation, in an inner IP header. Also, we discussed the number of BFD sessions between the pair of these two VTAPs, and what is management VNI and how it can be used for BFD over VXLAN. Next. So, yes, the destination MAC address question was raised in a routing directorate review, and it suggested that use of some MAC address is intrusion on tenant's MAC address space, and thus it's not allowed in VXLAN. But actually we had a proposal originally at some point is that to use allocated by Yana MAC address. So since then, in the discussion, we decided no, we leave this out. We removed it from the document. We formulated this following text, and this is a quote from the current version of the document. Destination MAC. This must not be one of the tenant's MAC addresses. The destination MAC address may be the address associated with the destination VTAP. The MAC address may be configured or it may be learned via control plane protocol. Details of how the MAC address is obtained outside the scope of this document. Further, and this discussion is not yet closed because we further recommend to use loopback, one of the loopback IP addresses, whether for IPv4 range or v6, and we leave MAC address for this destination IP address, basically pointing to this text. So we have unresolved comment proposal to define some default MAC address that will be used if the destination IP address is a loopback. In my opinion, and I talked with Santosh about it, so like an active editors of the draft, that it still goes back to the dedicated MAC address, even to the more limited scope applicability. So which probably we don't want to do. Yes, probably in some implementations of VXLAN that look only at their destination MAC address of an inner header and then might not look an IP payload. There might be a problem. So I haven't heard from the author of this proposal that he is okay with the current text. So in my opinion, this proposal still stands, and I think that it's up to the working group to decide how to handle it.
Okay.
Further, so what we're stating is, and again, these are all quotes from their current version. VTAP must validate the packet if the destination MAC of the inner Ethernet frame matches one of the MAC addresses associated with the VTAP. The packet must be processed further. If the destination MAC of the inner Ethernet frame does not match of the VTAP's MAC addresses, then the processing of the received VXLAN packet must follow the procedures described in the VXLAN RFC. If the BFD session is using the management VNI, and we have discussion in section 6, a BFD control packet with unknown MAC address must not be forwarded to VM, because it's not bomb procedure. I think that there is agreement with this text. There is no comments to this text. Okay, next, please. Now on IP address. Because we had a lot of good input from people familiar with existing implementations of BFD over VXLAN, the following statement uses should, not must, even though editors of the document were quite inclined to use must here. So you can see it. It says should use one of the loopback. I knew that will happen. should we use one of the loop addresses? And again, that is because we were told that there are implementations that hard-coded using different than that, and we're not told that they can be configured for something else.
So Matthew Bocci, Nokia. So in the past, when we've sort of tunneled BFD, we've always set it to 127/8.
I would say even more generic. When we do any IP OEM over the tunnel,
Yeah.
we use loopback.
Yeah, and I can't
And
remember.
it's OSP ping and BFD. Actually, BFD followed the same because the first one, it was RFC 4379, which changed the loopback in another RFC, I think 1122.
And that was for a pretty good reason, I think, was something to do with if it gets extracted at the wrong part along the place along
Right.
the path,
So-
you don't forward it, so you can't use it as an attack vector into anything.
Absolutely, yes. That might.
Yeah, and I've also come across sort of interoperability issues with things like early implementations of seamless BFD and LSP BFD, where people have sort of, some implementations will check for 127/8, some won't, and some will discard if it's not 127/8. And I'm just worried that if you're implementing this on a box that's also doing all sorts of other flavors of BFD, you're going to run into issues if you allow anything other than 127/8.
Again, my understanding is that this is something that a working group can decide.
So speaking personally rather than as a chair, I think we all agree that if you're writing this from scratch and you had a clean implementation, the procedure here is the right thing to do. And the proper thing likely to do as an industry is just simply to pressure people to conform with this. Certainly, you as an implementer have that choice simply by making sure that your stuff doesn't interoperate with things you consider broken.
I don't know if there's some way of. Sorry.
Matthew, you are suggesting that we should have a must in place of the should.
Well, personally, I'd rather do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Could you at least write down? So Martin Vigor speaking. Sorry. Could you at least write down what are the risks of not respecting that should?
Are you asking him to basically rewrite the reason why 4379 says to not do this?
Yeah.
Maybe appropriate to put a reference in as to why 4379
Okay.
did.
Okay, that will be easy.
Maybe in the security consideration section, write something to say. Just to say,
I think that I think that we had more extended text why we said TTO1, but yeah, that will be not a problem. Absolutely. Okay, so should we take it as a working group decision, or it will go to the mailing list?
I think documenting the security considerations just
Yeah, no, but changing to must. Because I think that, yeah, documenting its informational part, but I think that more important is changing should to must.
is the implementer that does this willing to identify themselves?
I can dig through the email, but we can just announce it and just wait for people to scream.
Yeah. So the motivation to force the change, just simply say, you have to be compliant, is that we want to make them do things. As best I remember the working group discussion, we have currently 2 parties that actually implement this. So we have enough to verify that people can actually do things in an interoperable fashion. The problem with taking early implementations is people are taking the risk to help refine the technology, and there's some expectation that they eventually become conformant with the documents, but there's also a desire on their part that by partaking of the process, we don't force them to the position that they regret actually doing things early. So the question becomes, what level of disincentive are we providing by making them non-conformant and then documenting that we're going to break their interop by fiat?
I think it depends how widely deployed they are.
That's my question. So let me stick an arbitrary name in there that I do not believe is the party, but VXLAN is, the VMware is actually the one that did this, and you tell them, well, you can't do that, and they're not conformant. How many people do you think are going to write implementations that actually take care of that?
Yeah, actually, since we have one of the editors familiar with their what their concern are, BFD over VXLAN is not their concern anymore because they transitioned to another overlay protocol.
But you
But
see my
if there's
point.
still a lot out there, everyone's going to have to accept packets that have a
Yeah.
non-127/8.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
typically the way we see most of these implementations behaving is people will throw on a knob to turn on non-compliant mode for whatever reason, and as long as the default is covered by the should, it takes care of both the security considerations and you basically have an implementation knob of last resort.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's just what's common practice.
It's ugly and a headache, and development and testing, and
Okay. Yeah.
kind of holds up the
Yeah, we
development
do-
stuff.
I think that our normative dictionary does not have strongly recommend form. So we have only must and should, which is recommend.
We have should not.
Yes,
You
but
could say should not rather than must not be.
yeah, we can do double negative. So what we're gonna do at this point? So we forget about existing, we ignore their pain, or we'll just try.
I think the discussion that we've had, across that 300 messages, I
Mhm.
think that was almost 70 of the messages.
Yeah.
And my feeling of the consensus for the conversation is the should gets the feature out there. It encourages people to do the right thing. And implementers that choose not to interoperate with them have the option to do so.
Okay. Okay, so then we just add text to security consideration explaining the choice and probably pretty much cut and paste text from for the 379 or 8029, which is 9.
Yes, and if we wish to be religious in there, we could also add in a sentence saying that implementations that previously did this for early deployment purposes really should capitalize.
Wall of shame, yes.
Yes, and you don't have to shame them. We just have to tell people to do the right thing.
Okay, a number of BFD sessions in management VNI. So the current version stresses that in most use cases, single BFD session between two VTAPs is sufficient to monitor continuity of their VXLAN tunnel. But we do recognize that there might be cases when operator would like to do monitoring per VNI. And then they are free to choose that.
Okay.
Also, what we introduce is that operator may designate one of the VNI that doesn't have any tenant as management VNI, and then use this VNI to monitor VXLAN tunnel. We refer to this as a management VNI, similar to management VLAN. But we do not specify which VNI number should be used. We just indicate that may use VNI number 1. We had some discussion. Some people suggested to use VNI number 0, but we were informed that there are some hardware and some other considerations that might limit the use of VNI 0. So we decided to recommend, well, not recommend, say may use VNI as a default value for management. Which actually, all this discussion led me to think, and something that probably we can discuss with the NVO3 group, is do we want to have, for the sake of Geneva document as well, a document which discusses use of management VNI at more extent?
I think yes, for sure. I mean, this is going to end up being very similar, I would think, between.
Yes, because
Exactly.
that was, again, I kind of can see this same discussion or at least same text being repeated, so probably better to have some document which
Yeah.
makes it more deterministic. Okay, so we probably will get to that sooner than later. Open-ish questions. Yes, we do have some open questions. And again, as I mentioned already earlier, we do have a proposal to have some default value for the MAC address in case that management VNI is used for BFD session. So in a smaller text underneath, you see that, yes, they say it simplifies configuration, but at the same time, in my opinion, it goes back to their allocated number.
So my impression from the text is that we go back to an IETF allocated number here, and this almost is a request to NV03 to designate this number in that new management management instance document, that this is the MAC address that it should get by default if it doesn't otherwise choose one. Is that a valid interpretation?
There was no suggestion because actually their future work on more general management VNI document, we haven't got any further rather than realization that, yeah, that might be a good community service. So again, I understand their interest and rationale of having some well-known default MAC address here. Again, it's limited because the proposal is that to use this number only if it's management VNI. But at the same time, so it's the same whether it's any way can intrude on a tenant space. So because what guarantees that tenants would not allocate something randomly?
Mm-hmm. So my personal impression for this is that we likely should not ask IANA for a specific address, that it is reasonable for this current version of the document that we're trying to RFC to say that a number should be used, supplied by the user. If we do actually end up with a management instance document for NV03, it is not unreasonable to ask that document to potentially update this RFC to supply this as a default. So this is sort of a backdoor way to maybe add it at a later point if this is a thing that NV03 wishes to do.
But if you don't have a well-known MAC address, aren't you asking every implementation to have a configurable knob for the far-end MAC address?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it does make it very clumsy.
Because I think we had discussions similar to this with some other forms of OEM and MPLS-TP, and people just push back and said, but we really don't want to have that sort of configuration.
Well, it could be configuration with control plane.
And this
pigeons.
What's control plane?
This is a common
pigeons. Okay, pigeons.
Yeah, this is a common discussion for BFD. We're defining the protocol mechanism. The bootstrapping of this is going to probably go on top of something else.
Yeah.
Actually, I do favor a proposal that Jeff made because the document which is more generic and will address the management VNI for all overlay protocols and will set for all other protocols rather than BFD. So if we define it here, that will be the wrong place because it will be limited or might be viewed only as applicable to BFD. I think it should be applicable to all communication between VTAPs. Because management VNI is a control and signaling channel between VTAPs. So any communication between them over this channel should be using, if we decide, should be using this MAC address, including BFD.
So let's take that forward. You know,
So, okay, then the proposal or this, okay, is it proposal or decision that will not address this request in this document?
that I think that is the reasonable thing to do. That's the consensus we currently have from the mail discussion. We've provided a possible path that allows us to add it after the fact. Updating other RFCs is a reasonable thing to do. And this means that we can unblock this document through the RFC queue. And depending on exactly how much work there is to do in NVO3 for such a management document, maybe that comes out much faster than this.
Okay, let's make a chase. Fine. Stronger normative for the use of VNI 1. So basically a change from may to recommendation. Again, this is open question to the working group. Many pointed out that the fact that VLAN 1 is, my understanding, de facto standard management VLAN. Again, I couldn't find any normative reference to VLAN 1 being management VLAN. But from my experiences, yes, that's usually what's being configured. So as an editor, or with the Santos too, so we think that the current text is reasonable. So again, no action here.
Yep.
Right? Okay, good. And last, actually, it was questioned almost at 11th hour from Santos himself. So demand mode is not mentioned in the document explicitly, and is it indication that it's outside the scope of the draft? And if it's outside the scope of the draft, should we have the same statement similar to in regard to BFD echo mode?
So for BFD echo mode, the consideration is traffic that needs to be encapsulated outside the protocol. So that's the reason why it has to be explicitly set outside, because we have to have the discussion what the forwarding for such echo packets would look like. For demand mode being on top of async, it's a base, the demand is part of 5880 as core feature. Unless there is a reason we think that it breaks for some strange reason in this environment, then we don't need to mention it because it's just a supported feature.
Okay. Okay. Being pedantic, do you think that we need to have some clarification to that along the line that you just mentioned, or just leave it as is?
Just leave it as is.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. And with that, I think that we have one action point to the editors to add the text, which is pretty clear. And then for the working group chairs to decide what we do next.
So we've completed working group last call. We've gotten substantial feedback. The amount of text change as part of the feedback has been relatively small. So what that means is we've mostly converged on those points.
Yeah, we mostly talked.
We've achieved consensus, which is all we can do. So once you've added the other item, we can each take a quick editor's pass through things, but the working group last call has concluded. And once we have the new version, we'll advance it to the IESG.
Okay, would we have AD review and comments? No, I'm asking. I'm not asking for it. I'm just. Okay, so, okay, in the meantime, so we'll get to our action point and we'll report when it's ready.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So this will be a very brief update on BFD for large packets. I'm speaking in the context of a contributor rather than as working group chair. So a very, very brief update. We requested working group last call for version 1 because we thought it was done. Didn't see any additional things needed to be added. And as is often the case in IETF, this scared people into looking at the draft. We got a lot of feedback, I think in particular for Les Ginsburg. The points that we addressed from that feedback in draft 02, which is currently published, is there's more operational discussion about detecting MTU mismatches. There's more discussion about ECMP impacts. That one I think in particular came from Robert Rushuk. One of the open items to have text written is still discussion about how this operates with regards to SBFD procedures, where the reflector basically is a passive entity in most cases. Do we want to make sure that it reflects a specific MTU, or could we choose discriminators that do each? So we're going to address that as part of 03. We did not specifically make any protocol changes as part of the 02 considerations. This is mostly operational ones. The 03 ones will be minor protocol discussions for SBFD, but again, the main procedures themselves shall not be altered. So since we believe that we may have addressed all the operational considerations that were brought up, we'll request that the working group last call be re-reviewed for the 03 version, and then we'll see about advancing that based on that. As mentioned in prior presentations, we do have interop between Juniper equipment and some software-based stacks, and seems to work perfectly fine. Any questions? Okay. Our next presentation is on the one-armed BFD use case. So who has not signed the blue sheets? Everybody has signed the blue sheets, yes? Okay, please advance the blue sheets to the middle of the room. If you could take the microphone here. And please, I do not know who you are.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 minutes is enough. And this is a very...
Sorry. Would you please state for the microphone your name?
How about this?
No, not your volume. Who are you?
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Wei Changcheng from China Mobile. And this use case, we just... we just use it in our data center network. And next page.
I have to advance, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the application scenario is very simple because when we deploy the data center, maybe we did not open BFD, but in some application scenarios, such as if we want to use data center for our telecom VNF, that means something like that we call the telecom cloud. At that application scenario, we need to improve the availability of the data center. So we hope to rise the BFD between the gateway and the NIC of the VM. At that application scenario, because it's very hard for the NIC to support the BFD protocol, so we want to use something like the echo mode to run the BFD functions. In the gateway side, we run the BFD protocol and give the destination MAC address to the NIC, but the IP address to itself. That is overlay network, and the VXLAN will forward the BFD packet to the NIC directly. And when the NIC received the packet, it get the IP address and route it back to the gateway. So that in this application scenario, no BFD rest in the NIC, and we still can use BFD to monitor the link's quality. So next page. So we compiled this application scenario and the function to the current BFD RFC. We found that the ICO function is used on the two systems that deploy the BFD. But our application scenario, as I just mentioned, in the other side, there's no BFD rest. And the next page, we also see the BBF TR 146, and it gives some description. I think it's similar to the current RFC. So it's also not gives a clear description if the both sides of the system need rest BFD together. Okay, next page. So the question for us is that does ICO function require remote peer node to support BFD protocol? It seems like it's not clear in current RFC as well as in current BBF document. So the other question is that whether does something else need to be considered with ICO scenarios such as BFD Young model. So our next step or our propose is that it might be modify the current RFC to clarify the BFD ICO functions, or maybe we can give an informational draft to describe the BFD functions at the scenario I just mentioned. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. So I will start speaking. If I'm too fast, feel free to ask me to slow down. About 4 years ago, I think, maybe a little bit longer, I started receiving strange emails at work asking about running BFD with Echo without actually having the BFD protocol in use. This seemed like a very strange scenario to me, and I couldn't figure out what the request actually was. When you look at what was actually requested for support from the routers and from the hosts, really they asked for packet loopback for BFD Echo port to actually be enabled. And it's like, okay, I understand this is not a bad way to test whether or not you have remote connectivity. But when there is no BFD protocol involved, there is nothing for BFD necessarily to standardize. So I didn't understand the nature of the question. And then a little over a year ago, somebody may be aware of the Broadband Forum TR146 document. And this gave me why people were asking about it. It was because another standards organization had decided that they were going to try to make use of a small piece of our functionality, but in a way that was not well specified. Their document has errors in it. This is an understood thing. And it is, as you say, one-sided or one-armed. The protocol literally is, from BFD's perspective, shut off. What we have is effectively some switch that we turn on, the echo function, regardless of whether or not BFD has been negotiated. So we're sort of using a piece of the BFD machinery, and we certainly could use the piece of a BFD echo implementation that understands, interruptions to loop, that things are up or things are down, and report it to a client protocol. So certainly somebody's BFD implementation could be let's call it broken in this way so that this functionality was took effect. Where the discussion is interesting, so you're the first to bring this to IETF to ask about this. BBF has not come to IETF. I found out about this completely by accident. And as I mentioned, their document is not quite right. And one of Juniper's members of BBF has said that they may write a updated version of the document at a later point in time. Where this leaves us is an interesting position of IETF does not describe this behavior. BBF has some description of the behavior, but it's not correctly described. The functionality is useful, but BFD as a protocol itself is not actually active on this session. So to some extent, we're describing how a broken BFD could be used. So our problem as IETF is, do we wish to put a document together that effectively republishes the scenario from BBF, maybe with corrections in a IETF context? Part of that is having a discussion with Martin, our AD, to figure out if this fits into the charter. Part of the discussion is discussion with any liaisons we may have with Broadband Forum to figure out why did you use our protocol in the first place without talking to us. But I think the point you're bringing to the working group, and thank you for the presentation, is that this is a helpful piece of functionality. And you also gave an example of could we maybe extend Yang to cover this behavior so that such things could be configured. So there is possibility for the work. Certainly if you wish to be one of the authors on the document towards IETF, that can be done, but there are many process discussions that have to happen first.
No problem. I think it's will be very useful because currently a lot of overlay network is deployment deployed not only within the data center such as the VX line, as well as one system named SD1, especially for some industry internet. So maybe those kind of function can be used in more application scenario. So that's useful.
Right. And we have, I think, two open questions that make this potentially a little more difficult. No, the first observation is that IETF has sometimes republished another working group's, another standards body's document in an IETF context as an RFC. Sometimes that's actually a handover where we take over maintenance of work for them. The issue that we do have to verify before we can start to progress is, since BBF is a standards body, do they have an intellectual property restriction on their proposal? So even if we wanted to do work on this, we would have to figure out the status of that to start.
Yeah, but I think BFD raised by BBF, by IETF, and I think IETF is a host of the BFD. So
I personally agree with you. However, lawyers do not. So, we'll have a larger question, I think.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
Les Ginsberg. This is kind of interesting. But I'm wondering about the interactions with the various forms of strict mode. I think that would be problematic because you don't actually have a BFD session, and particularly you don't have BFD at all on the peer. So,
yeah, the sort of weird observation I've made as this has come up at my job over the prior years is that they're using BFD echo packets to do the job. And if I had to take a guess as an engineer, there's probably some sort of commodity silicon vendor that happens to have a BFD echo loopback programmed into their hardware that makes this cheap and easy. And people are just using that. But this could be ping. Literally any mechanism could be used that tests the remote connectivity, and the BFD state machinery for clients could be used to echo it back.
Actually, thanks to bringing this TR 146 to attention, I was not aware of it. And when I read it, I believe they do use not only BFD echo, they use a combination of pole sequence to communicate diag modes. And actually that's where I found more mistakes and error misconceptions and no reference to the final, for example. They just say, oh, we send a reply, which is not accurate at least terminology. I can understand what they mean, but the terminology is wrong. So I think that, again, we have this week David Sinecrop. So if we want to communicate something to BBF, that he can put on the liaison hat, and we can use that. And actually the good thing is that BBF member meeting is 1 week from this week.
I believe it was David that brought 146 to my attention the first time.
Okay. Actually, I would be surprised because when I mentioned to him, he gave me this stare look that,
Okay.
Okay, but might be at some time back he knew about it and just forgot.
It was either David or one of Juniper's internal people.
Well, or it could have been Dave Allen.
Yes, it was Dave Allen. Sorry.
Yes, because actually it's out of his and Dave Thorne old working area.
Okay.
The document.
So Mark Chen from Huawei. So I think this idea is very interesting. I think it's very useful for some scenario. In my personal opinion, I think there may be some protocol work need to be defined in this working group, because for the traditional BFD session, we need to set the we only need to set our my discriminators, right? Which we use the protocol to learn the discriminator of the remote side.
Mm-hmm.
But for this one called one-arm BFD, we need to set both. So there may be some different work protocol process need to be done for this solution.
So based on my understanding, talking to people who seem to have some flavor of this implemented, the whole issue here is that they don't want to put any BFD machinery into effectively it's a host device at the other side, to like a media gateway for cable networks, that sort of thing. Very dumb boxes. And they're relying on the packet loop to simply fulfill the need. So this is very bad from the working group's perspective, because we don't have any negotiation that can help the BFD sender figure out what packet speed the receiver actually wants to get. So this is probably okay for the people who did this work, because for their environment, they knew what speed they were willing to support. It's either very slow or they know how fast they can safely do things. Yeah. You're absolutely correct that if you're trying to do this in a safe fashion, you would be using a full BFD implementation that its only purpose is to say, I'm not willing to do fast async. I'm going to go into demand mode immediately. Feel free to use Echo. You would get the same profile, but to do so, you would actually need to have enough of a BFD implementation to run the state machine.
Yeah, I think, for that aspect, I think I agree with you. There no need some protocol extension between the local side and remote side, but for the local processing, based on the current processing, I think we need some modification to the current processing to to how to handle this. Have the same
No discriminators. Remember, this is Echo, and it's literally just IP packets. This is a very dumb mechanism.
Yeah.
But aren't you kind of echoing yourself in a way? I mean, the thing that springs to mind with this is there's another OEM mechanism called LSP self-ping, where you just flip the packet. You just address a packet yourself and send it into an LSP, and it comes back.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the nature of BFD echo.
Kind of, yeah. So that's what I'm wondering about the negotiation you're talking about. Is really you're negotiating with yourself because it's just a route. Just route back.
you just send it out, and because of the remote side, that is very weak
Right.
system, and but it can route back as a packet. So maybe we can use very low speed BFD packet read, but we can check the link's quality. That's enough.
Right. And calling it a BFD packet is a little misleading. It's BFD echo packets are just data.
Yeah.
It just happens to be to a well-known port.
Yeah, Louis Chen. One direction maybe from the echo side is right now actually do not require echo side to do anything, right?
No.
So therefore, actually for troubleshooting and also for some other statistic collections, right? We may specify the format so that the echo side can optionally, turn on to get the statistics, so that to troubleshoot, to look at what happened in the networks and how many sections be established. So those are things may be useful in some places actually, but you need to identify who are the sender. I think that is important, which is the discriminator or license information embed into the packet itself.
Actually, I think that this exchange brings very good question that was somewhere in the back of my mind, is would be good in this document, even when we write it, that to explain what exactly can be verified and monitored using this technique.
Right.
Yeah.
So that to have right expectations. And I want to point out that echo works only over single hop.
Yep.
Okay, so it could be a tunnel, but you're still crossing a single hop.
Right.
Yeah.
And relaying a question from Robert Rashuk on Jabber was, is spoofing protection considered in this echo mode? And Greg, you just answered a portion of the question, which is that it's single hop only, whether it's a tunnel or not. But beyond that, this is just a echo functionality, and the remote side exercises no protocol behaviors at all. So it is up to the sender to put something into the packet that they would recognize. The BFD 5880 spec does not talk about that at all. It's my impression from having talked to other implementers that sometimes they'll put proprietary stuff in there that does attempt to look for it. They're not going to publicly say what they do. That said, you can fire up TCP dump and look at it, and you'll probably get a guess on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the actions for the working group is, we'll continue discussion on the mailing list. We'll discuss things with the BBF and figure out how to take this forward.
Okay. Thank you.
And that concludes our content. We will probably be meeting as part of the upcoming IETF. And thank you for coming to IETF for 106. Oh, that's the whole thing. Basically, the way to picture this feature, like I said, this surprised me, and it kept on coming back because they never described why they called it BFD. And 146 finally told me that.